Next, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Buck for information about theory of action.
So I can honestly say I've been excited about this all day. Noreen Bush is here today with us, and she was a co-facilitator along with John Zimmerman. She's brought a team of people that are also willing to speak, and they participated in this theory of action. I don't want to step on their toes, so they're going to go first, and then I think I'm going to have an opportunity at the end to talk a little bit about the segue to next steps. So with that, Noreen, welcome to you and your team.
Well, thank you very much for having us this evening. Again, Dr. Buck invited us to really present on not just the learning of this group, but really the product, which was really exciting work. My name, again, is Noreen Bush, and I am a Drake superintendent student, and Dr. Buck has been my mentor. So thanks, Dr. Buck.
So this is the time when you say, hey, I'm looking for a project in some hours. Do you have an idea? Do I have an idea? And it'll only be about 150 hours of your life. So,
yeah,
hey.
So that has been a great opportunity for me. But my day job is I work at College Community School District in a curriculum position in our district office and lead our secondary teams in a lot of work. So this was a wonderful partnership. If you think about the greater perspective of all children of Cedar Rapids, we too serve children of Cedar Rapids. So thank you for that opportunity. Our task force members are going to speak to a couple different points of this work, but I just will jump right in and talk about the sequence of events and what happened, and we'll move right along. So we met 4 times throughout the, I guess you could say, a spring semester. We started our work in February and ended our work in May. It was about 12 hours worth of meeting time face-to-face with 85 members of your community, but those 85 members also sought feedback from your entire community. So I would feel confident saying that hundreds of people had input on this work. This entry task was where we started our work, and that is, as learners, what did the task force members really know about a theory of action? So if you look at this target, it's going to bring us full circle. At the end of our presentation, we're going to show you the representation of what the task members learned through this process. So the black on the outside of that target would represent, I don't really know much about a theory of action as a learning member, and the yellow would represent, I really know a lot. And so this will represent our learning as we move forward. We use these meeting norms, which I would recommend are really great for any meeting, but we really focused on a we emphasis. You mentioned earlier as board members how important it is to consider every child in your community, the diverse population, and so we really can't have a they mindset, we have to have a we mindset. And so we use that mindset throughout all of our work. And then also the last bullet, a growth mindset, was also framing our work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Amy's going to step up and talk about just her experience as one of these task force members and what it meant to her.
Our team is really excited about being able to raise and lower a podium. We have found that very engaging. You know, it's fun to come to the board meeting just so we can do that. You know, it was very exciting to be a part of this team. And that first essential question, what is our shared understanding of our vision, excellence for all? The word that really stands out to me is the word shared. And so it is not how a consulting firm might define excellence for all, or how the school board would define excellence for all, or what have you. It is how, it's not even how Amy Foster would define excellence for all. It is how we as a collective team, as a task force, would define excellence for all. And this was hard, tedious work. It really was, but it was very exciting. We had people from all over the community. I mean, we had a lawyer, we had a dad who didn't say what his career was. We had district employees, of which I am one. I'm a reading teacher. And the challenging part was hearing all of those different ideas and bringing them together and representing all of these wonderful, rich ideas in a concise manner. And so we think we've got a pretty good idea of what makes excellence. You want to go on to the next slide then? And then here we had our learning targets, just like we would in the classroom. And this growth mindset was a really important piece of that. Thinking about our own thinking about the thinking of others, and wrapping your mind around diverse ideas and putting those together. And it really was a very beautiful experience, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Amy. And down we go. So this is just a representation of what is a growth mindset, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with Carol Dweck's work, but it's really about what the possibilities are and not the limitations. And when you're working on a direction for a strategic plan, which is really what this theory of action is, you have to allow yourself to think about possibilities and not limitations about where we've been. So that could cause you to say, oh, but that never worked before. We haven't done that before. A growth mindset means what are the possibilities for all children, and we aren't going to limit ourselves of thinking about what those possibilities are. So this is just a visual representation of what a growth mindset is. We kept framing all of our work around a growth mindset. And so this was where we started our work in February of just a visual representation of what excellence for all could mean. And so we are going to, I think we're going to move forward. Yes, not yet. You're not on yet. Thank you. All right. So one thing we didn't want to do is forget where we've been as well. So continuous improvement has been the heart of what Cedar Rapids has been doing recently, and the spirit of innovation. So we wanted to make sure that we honored where we've been and the things that have been important to the district, those being two components. So here's the big question for you all as learners. What is a theory of action? And a lot of our folks on that target were in the black zone. They were in the outside. They hadn't done a theory of action work before. And so we started with a very simple video, and you can Google this if you'd like, on the fun theory. And that is thinking about what if you were to frame fun into everything that we do, would it make work easier? And this particular video just shows how over and over again, when a staircase is just a regular staircase, people kept choosing to take the escalator or the escalator up. And so to get more people to use the stairs for a healthy lifestyle, they turned the stairs into a live piano. And so more and more people started using the piano instead of using the escalator. So that's testing their theory. If we make the staircase fun, will more people use the staircase? So we were testing our theories as a theory of action group. So it's if we do what, then what would we expect from that theory? So if you just look at the first line of this slide, we really rooted most of our work in beliefs. And so what is it we believe for all children, and what will deliver on the promise of excellence for all? So each one of these folks were part of a group, and they developed what could be potential belief statements for the district. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jillian, who's going to talk a little bit about those beliefs.
So when we started talking about our beliefs, what we really had to do first was think about that mindset and paradigm shift. So we've all heard the phrase, I'll believe it when I see it. And we really had to stop and think about changing our mindset and our paradigm to know that if we want excellence for all, we are going to have to truly believe in all of this work before we're going to see those results with our kids. So these are our kids, this is our community, what do we want for them? And we are going to have to truly believe that before we're going to see that. And so we had to believe it then, we have to believe it now, we're going to have to believe that when we carry this out with our adult action steps.
So rooting that work in the beliefs, we continued to, this was kind of like all encompassed in the very first meeting. So this is a lot of content, just if you get, for 85 people to get on the same page. So we knew that we had to start with, okay, where have we been? So at the end of that meeting, 85 people, we had some rotation groups to look at your current state and your current data, and we asked ourselves these questions. What can we celebrate on the current strategic plan and the current things that are happening in the school district? What could we consider as other possibilities, and what do we really need to reconsider? The data is telling us what we're currently doing isn't making a powerful impact on children, and we need to reconsider what we might be doing. So we decided to really dream big and think about what those things would be, which then resulted in answering some of these questions for our future work. That all happened in the first meeting, which is a lot. When we sent information out to the teams based on the feedback from that current strategic plan, going into our second meeting, we had data based on an online survey that was sent to all of these task force members. So with that, we ended up having these results. This is really cool, actually. If you look at this data from a board member's point of view, I would really want to know this. The smaller the bar, actually, the better, because folks had to rate things from 1 to 10. We had about 13 big ideas at the end of that meeting, first meeting, and we sent it to the task force members. We said, prioritize. We're not going to be able to do all the list that was created on that first meeting, so we had them prioritize ranking 1 to 10. So if you look at what the smallest bars are, those ended up being the things that resurfaced during our second meeting. So we had the initial start to what would be the big ideas. In addition to that, we also knew, well, even though there were 13 things on this list, we still couldn't focus on 13 things. That's a lot of things to measure. So how would we narrow this down? So we got into groups, we each got $1, and in that second meeting, we spent the money. So each group had $1, and you had to divvy it up and spend your buck, how you wanted to spend your buck amongst those 13 items. From that evening, then we generated what were 6 big ideas where we were really going to focus. You will see that these themes are continuing from where you've been in the past, maybe a little different wording, but again, to honor the task force input, this is where we landed. From there, we came back to our beliefs then. So now we have 6 big ideas. What do we believe about those big ideas? And if we're going to frame them in a theory of action, if we believe equity for all children, then what is that going to look like? So then we generated some drafts, and this is all just representation of the task force work. And then, after that second meeting, maybe you all saw Dr. Buck's screencast with this visual representation. We got input from the rest of the community on these 6 big ideas. So this graphic was a product of the task force work, and we just wanted to give some sort of visual representation to the community and get feedback from them about what they thought about the initial drafts of a belief statement. So again, in 2 meetings, that's 6 hours, we had a lot of product and were able to get a lot of input. So that was our first, I guess you could say, launch of our first draft of some big ideas as well as some belief statements. So then that work came back, and then this is when these guys had to do some really, really, really hard work. So our belief statements came back to the team, and this is just a sample of one. Then we had all these thousands of pieces of feedback from the screencast that Dr. Buck sent. Over 300 people replied to that screencast and gave narrative feedback. We broke that narrative feedback back down to the 6 big ideas, gave it to the team. They read every piece of information and then decided, okay, what does that mean about the belief statement of what we need to draft? That is a lot of revision process. And then finally, we were able to take the revisions back to the final meeting. So this is where the learning landed. Again, that's that target. And if you look at the target, where we started was the yellow dots of the theory of action members. And so they just stuck a dot about where they thought they were in understanding of theory of action. The pink represents the second meeting, the green represents the third meeting, the blue represents the fourth meeting. So by the fourth meeting, people were feeling really confident about what their learning was, but also what they were doing for the kids of Cedar Rapids. We got feedback on the graphic as well as the belief statements. And this is not the final product of the graphic, but it gave us a great idea about where to go, and the task force gave us some really good input about what the graphic could potentially do. So if you remember where we started, there was that Excellence for All puzzle graphic. Well, we ended up landing there again, just in a different representation based on the task force input. So this is the first big idea, and it's about student learning. And you might think, gosh, seriously, in 12 hours, all you created was 1 sentence about student learning, but thousands of pieces of data were used to craft these belief statements. So I think you could feel confident as board members that your community had input on every single one of these belief statements and the big ideas. The second is student ownership. The third, equity. The fourth, culture climate. And then Jennifer's just going to speak briefly about leadership as a task force member and what her group was able to do.
So we were given the opportunity to choose which big idea we wanted to work with, and leadership was important. I think it was great that we could choose as an aspiring leader in our district, that we could not only see a final product, but be a part of the discussion, be able to be right there in the intimate part of seeing the feedback from our community, and also hearing other people who were invested in leadership in our district, and be able to craft a statement which really did go through multiple cycles of change. So,
And then Stephanie's going to comment on innovation.
So, as Jennifer mentioned, we were self-identifiers, and so with innovation, we had a group of people who were very, very wanting to shake up everything, even the good, just like make it change, we're gonna make it cool, and we're gonna do it in a completely different way. So we actually had to kind of rein ourselves in a little bit to the more practical pieces. So our crew was passionate. We ended up emphasizing student passion, creativity, and the future of the children, and to focus on experiences. And so really trying to think through project-based learning, trying to get a little bit away from the jargon, but yet make it so that the students are experiencing as they're learning so that they can lend themselves to better futures. Some of the challenges we had were kind of making sure that we were steering away from just technology, because innovation is more than just a technology solution. It's different types of teaching, just different ways of thinking about little pieces of your day-to-day. We decided that technology and innovation need to be implemented well and supported in many ways and practical in design. We also talked about how we are competing not with just the neighboring districts around here, not with just trying to be the best district in Iowa, but really competing with like the best schools in the world. And so that's where we have to kind of think a little bit differently also. Like, this is a big picture because our students are going to be competing with a global economy too. So that's kind of a way to think about innovation as well.
Thank you, Stephanie. And then finally, so we get all this work done, then what, right? And so we have our 6 big ideas. We have some belief statements to anchor our theories of action. So if we believe this, then what? So Dr. Buck, maybe you want to make a couple comments on this.
Yeah, first of all, team, thank you. Nice work. And that's a lot of work in very few sentences there. So this is one of the things the board has heard. So the document that they showed early on there is that document that the board has had, I think for several years, about kind of the 5 big ideas that we've been working on: diversification of workforce, social emotional behavior, closing the achievement gap. I mean, you've kind of seen that list. So essentially what we intend to have happen now, this is information only tonight, but at some point we would like the board to consider adopting these sort of 6 big ideas as the guiding pieces as it works to deliver on the promise of excellence for all, because under each of those 6 pieces, we will expect to have an action plan with strategies, tactics, metrics underneath. And the best hope out of this whole process will be if there were puzzle piece-shaped cylinders under each, there's robust strategies, tactics, metrics under each, but also recognizing that it becomes a cylinder, that it's interconnected work. So you can't talk about student learning in terms of student learning outcomes from an academics perspective, but also social emotional behavior, and not have that impact culture and climate. So those 2 things are intimately linked, because the culture and climate that's created in a classroom and in buildings and in schools also impacts the work that's being done in social and emotional behavior supports for kids. So as a board, I think what I would invite, so equity, that's one of the items that emerged. Best hope would be we'll get to the point where we click on equity and our equity plan. So some of this work is already underway. Our equity plan would pop up underneath that, and it would give people information on the work that's underway related to equity. If you're familiar with our equity plan, as an example, the very first item in our equity plan is strategies and tactics that we're using to diversify our workforce. So the pieces that have been important to the board aren't lost in this work. They're just intended to be embedded in a different way. So the message here, and it's always a balancing act, this isn't intended to be new work. It's intended to organize the work in a way that will make sense to people so that we can align it ways that make sense and measure it in ways that make sense and be held accountable about what we're going to specifically do. So what I would anticipate happening, I get the microphone like, I'm sorry. Right.
We can tell you're pumped.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about it. So when you see innovation, we have a lot of really exciting, amazing, innovative things happening underway. But oftentimes when I'm in buildings, I'll be stopped by teachers or others, and they'll say, you know, I'm not a part of Blend Ed or the options program at Jefferson. I'm not a part of Johnson STEAM. I've been reading about some research on some effective practices that I think would help kids from a personalized learning standpoint, because personalized learning is built into innovation. How do I, as a teacher, know what it means to dive into this innovative work? So Trace, Dr. Pickering, is going to work with a team. He'll pull together a group, and they'll investigate this idea of innovation. They'll likely talk about things like macro innovation, so these big ideas that we've been working on. They'll also probably talk about micro innovation. So how do we help teachers feel empowered in their context to do even better things for kids in an innovative capacity? So it's really going to be a lot of work around identifying and defining beyond the definitions that are here, and then really getting at, like I say, the strategies, tactics, et cetera. And then this is a little bit of a secret, so the people that watch this on TV will know. So this is a teaser. We are going to get all staff together on August 22nd, and by all staff, I mean every staff member in the district at Kingston Stadium. And we are going to unveil the theory of action at this event, and it's going to be facilitated by a student. So he actually did a job shadow with me, and he thinks he wants to be a superintendent someday. So we said, hey, how would you like to facilitate an opening activity in front of 2,700 people? And you know what he said? Okay. I don't know what I was doing. I was 17, but it wasn't agreeing to facilitate a meeting in front of 2,700 people. But so he's ahead of the game, I guess, as it relates to becoming a superintendent. That's funny. And then we have students identified that are going to speak to why each of those pieces matter to them. So we're going to get the voice of kids resonating, and then we're going to invite staff to find themselves in this theory of action, and in many cases it'll be in more than one place. So as you think about goals for the superintendent and board, I think hopefully this will guide that work and conversation going forward. And then as you also think about workshops and potential workshops ideas, it may be worth, because we're farther down the path, we're farther down the path on some of these than others, and so we may go in order of some workshops about what are we doing with equity, what does that mean for leadership, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we're headed. So I'm very much optimistic about the work ahead.
When the task
team
force
is awesome.
started, I'm a graduate of Jefferson, class of '89. I'm a pseudo-Rapidian too. And I get pretty jacked up about this, knowing that this is the focus of our work as a community, because honestly, we all need to be focused on this work. And so being a college community employee, I just love to see the synthesis of the things that we're working on for the children of our community. I'd get a little choked up about that. So I'm jacked up too. It is exciting stuff. But this is what I think is so beautiful about this final graphic. It shows the interdependencies of each one of these components, and not one is more important than the other, but they can't work together without each other. So I think that's really cool. And then before, Jillian just has one more comment, but we started this work by thinking about a quote by one of my favorite poets and authors, Maya Angelou, and that one of the things that she said was, it's not what people say that you remember, it's how they make you feel. And we really started our work about what we feel about kids and what we believe about kids, and what do we believe in the end of this work. And so Jillian's going to comment about where the task force landed in the end.
So at the very end of our work together, we closed with an exit slip, like any good teacher would do in their classroom. We had an exit slip. On that exit slip, we had to identify whether we felt anxious, hopeful, or excited. And I'm a product person, but I'm also a process person. And coming into this, it was a little bit anxiety provoking, because you didn't really know exactly where this work was going to take us. You had a lot of hope for it, but we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. We really had to sit back and trust the process. And we did that. And at the very end, we made a human graph. And so we identified whether we were anxious, hopeful, or excited. And then we wrote a statement justifying the way that we felt. We threw them in the middle, picked up somebody else's paper, read it, and then we got into line. So the nice thing is at the very end, we had very few people that were anxious about the work, and then it was kind of a split between hopeful and excited. And personally, I think coming into this, I was a little anxious, but very hopeful, and leaving very excited. So very, very excited about this work. So very happy to be a part of it.
That's awesome. Does the board have questions? questions for the committee? Dr. Buck?
You were so thorough, I don't have any questions.
Very good.
Yeah, Keith.
Dr. Buck took half that time.
Exactly. In all fairness, I took half the time.
On the survey work that you said we'd want to look at, the 14 big ideas, I find it somewhat interesting that fiscal integrity is the lowest rated one.
I think that's great that you asked that question, because when we came back to framing the beliefs, we don't think about kids in dollars and cents. We think about kids in a matter of what we want for them, but really when you come down to the nuts and bolts of it, you have to have the resources, right?
Right.
To order to move things forward. But I would refer to the first group that presented tonight. You'll just be counting on them to get that done. But you have to anchor that. The assumption is, right, that you have to do that as a district. But the beliefs about children, you have to have the resources to get the beliefs to happen. So I would say you can't be negligent
I'd
about
say
your
you're
fiscal
right
integrity.
on that.
Yeah.
And another one that the board's been criticized about a lot is communication to community. That's probably been our number one complaint.
So you can see the graphic has community as really a foundation to all of this, and it encompasses all of this. But I think you're absolutely right. Having a strategic plan about how you're going to communicate will be essential for the success of this work.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, when I looked at this graphic for the first time, what really struck me is that it works in both directions. So as the community supports the learning, it leads to excellence. And when there's excellence supporting the learning, then those students become part of the community. They become excellent members of the community. So it works in both directions. So.
That's a great point, Amy. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? We have been looking at this for a long time, since Dr. Buck first brought it up with us many, many moons ago. And all of you have done amazing work. I think that this will hopefully help lead us as a board, not only as a district, but as a board in our discussions. And that's sort of my hope, is that as we look at our goal setting and some of our retreat topics, that we can go back and refer to this and say, these are really how our goals fit into the strategic plan of the district. When we work with Dr. Buck to set his goals and our expectations for the coming year in his work, that this again can be a reference point for us, knowing that the entire community's really had a say in that. So I know it was lots and lots of hours of work. I heard from a number of people in the committee that it was grueling work, but rewarding work. And so Noreen and Amy and Jillian and Jennifer and Stephanie and Dr. Buck and all the others that put all that effort into it, thank you so much. It definitely will be put to good use and will help drive us hopefully in a really positive path for many years to come.